Hi guys, Islander 5 is out to purchase now. As you can see from this amazing cover, this edition's theme is heroism, power and modernity. And the articles in there, which I have to say are rather good, don't you know, and I'm not just talking about mine, I'm talking about all of them, they discuss what the heroic society is and why modernity is destroying it, but why the spirit of the hero is looming throughout everything that's happening. And again, I say the cover goes hard, right? Because I mean, look at it. Just you would think that this was tailored for the current events, but no, we're always ahead of the curve. Anyway, it's thicker than normal as well because we just happen to have a load of extra content in there. We've got an exclusive interview from Rupert Lowe, letters from the editor, and a comic that's halfway through that's philosophically informed, which I think you'll enjoy. So get it while you can at shop.lotuses.com. The link will be in the description.
What we are witnessing right now, if you wouldn't mind getting my segment up, Samson, please, is the collapse of the New World Order and the establishment of a new World Order. What was once new is now old. The post-world order, as presented by NATO and all of the security agreements that were established during the Cold War and maintained afterwards, are disintegrating before our very eyes, or at the very least that is what we are being shown and that is what we are being told. So currently, right now, as we speak, as we are recording and streaming, the World Economic Forum Davos conference is going on right now, and that is of course the meeting of hundreds of world leaders and many business leaders as well to discuss what's going on, the plans for the future, how they're going to navigate all of the trials and hurdles that pop up throughout the year, their plans for the future. And this year, and I will say as well, right now Donald Trump, as far as I know, in the lead up to this, has not given his speech yet. I believe he is going to be giving his speech either during this broadcast or immediately after we have finished broadcasting, because his plane was a little bit late. So this information might need changing by the time you watch this on YouTube, but it's still relevant for right now. There's still a lot of relevant information here. So the spirit of dialogue is the current theme for it as we speak. But really, when you look at what is being said, it's really talking about perhaps the failures of globalism. Globalism as having been led by America in the world order, and how that has collapsed over the past year or so. They were speaking in similar kinds of terms this time last year. Ursula von der Leyen spoke this time last year about the worries of the collapse of global cooperation and the return of a kind of competitive and hierarchical world order. And the wool has been pulled from everybody's eyes by Trump and by the fact the Americans have seemed to kind of embrace their role as world hegemon. They have embraced their role as the head of an empire rather than just saying that they are the leaders of a international rules-based order. They've kind of pulled away from that and said, yeah, we're just in charge because we have the biggest stick. The whole rules-based order thing was what we wanted and needed it to be at any particular time so that we could get what benefited us the most. As such, there's been a recalculation, and they are discussing this on the world stage and saying that this has been torn down. This has been torn down. We need a new establishment, new security arrangements, new understandings of how we all relate to one another on the world stage so that we can ensure our own freedom and security for the future. And that's a lot of the stuff that's been spoken about on this. But carrying on the theme from the last segment, in that Trump's belligerence regarding Greenland and his geopolitical moves recently are deeply affecting the populist right in Europe and negatively affecting them as well, is that there is a real threat here for anybody who is dissident to the current Eurocrat elite, right? And what that is that America is now establishing itself as kind of a global bully. They're being explicit about it with the way that Donald Trump is saying that we'll throw tariffs here, we'll throw tariffs there so that we can get what we want. If we don't like how you're negotiating with us, we might just invade your territory. We might invade your sovereign territory. And so what this allows is for Eurocrat elites who, as we know, are open borders liberals. They are happy for Europe to be invaded by foreign third world nations. They're happy to establish censorious laws to prevent people from doing anything about it or saying anything about it. It allows them to present themselves as the defenders of Europe. It gives them that rhetorical wiggle room to say, you, populist right wing who are supportive of MAGA, why were you letting America push us around? Why were you letting America tell us what we can and can't do? We are the ones who are defending the interests and sovereignty of our own nations, and it gives them that wiggle room to potentially just have more casus belli for censoring you even more, for potentially tearing these parties apart. You might even, if you have been too supportive of MAGA in the way that I'm discussing, be able to be designated as a foreign threat if MAGA carries on down this path right now. They might use it as a stick to tear the European right wing apart.
And the more Trump deepens his ties with Putin's Russia, the more the populist right, the pro-US right in Europe is going to be seen as Kremlin stooge.
Yeah, they can be seen as Kremlin stooge or the equivalent of a Kremlin stooge if America is just like, if they're just saying, we'll take what you want.
Look, guys, you are basically just obeying someone who wants to divide Europe and conquer it and just wants to destabilize the region in order to be able to have more negotiational power when he is negotiating against individual nations.
And of course, in Europe, there's been this massive push as well, talking about, Ukraine will never cede territory to Russia. And it sort of primed people to think about in terms of, okay, Europe will not cede territory to its enemies. And then you've got the United States coming around trying to take Greenland off of a European country. So at the minute, the sort of psychology of both the populace and leaders is we're not ceding any territory to people outside of Europe. And then it's kind of the worst time Trump could have done it with the Ukraine stuff going.
I'm in favour of a strong Europe. I'm in favour of a strong Europe, and I want Britain to be involved with that, not necessarily as part of the EU or anything, but I don't think that America is doing any of us any favours right now. But a strong Europe should not be led by these people, because
Absolutely.
these people do not have Europe's best interests in mind, as I will demonstrate as we go along. But it lets somebody like Emmanuel Macron get up on stage wearing cool aviators.
What's going on here? Was it really hungover or something?
I would only hope so, but I think what's happened is he had eye surgery. Some are suggesting that perhaps Bridget was a little bit too harsh to him the night before and he's had some black eyes.
Candace will become relevant again. What happened?
Yeah. This is how he looks after he's put out the 17th hit on Candace Owens this week. He's feeling very powerful.
He's had so many meetings with Eastern European hitmen that he's sort of taken on some of their dress sense,
Yeah, their aesthetic. But it lets Emmanuel Macron present himself as the great French patriot, wanting to stop these mean, big American bullies from coming in and taking their stuff.
We have a place where rule of law and predictability is still the rule of the game. And my guess is that it is largely underpriced by the market. Having a place like Europe, which sometimes is too slow, for sure, and needs to be reformed, for sure, but which is predictable, loyal, and where you know that the rule of the game is just the rule of law, it's a good place. And I think this is a good place for today and for tomorrow.
So, yeah, Macron, who has been one of the people who's been banging the drum on European security for a long time. You can go back to immediately following the start of the Ukraine conflict, and he's got interviews with outlets like The Economist, where he's talking about the need to increase European defence spending, to secure European borders against foreign threats. Now he gets to double down on that. He gets to double down on saying that we are in charge. Look how cool I am in my aviators. We are going to wear the mask of virtue. We may be a little bit slow sometimes, we may be need a bit of reform, but we are loyal, we are kind, we are good-hearted, unlike those Russians to our east and those Americans to our west.
I mean, say what you will about Macron, but he's sort of playing the right notes here.
He is, and he's been and in the same speech he's calling out shifting to a world without rules. Again, this is what I mean with this. People are having to reorient themselves. Now that the facade of the rules-based international liberal order has kind of been torn down, they're having to reorient themselves, and that's what we're seeing here. We're shifting to a world without rules. Imperial ambitions are resurfacing. President Macron referencing fundamentally unacceptable tariffs used as leverage against sovereignty. This is all stuff that is going to play very, very well to a European populace that begins to feel threatened. Yeah, they feel threatened domestically as well, but that's part of the point, is they get to distract from that. Paris and the rest of France gets to distract from all of the terrible riots that tend to go on, all of the foreign crime that gets committed, because it unites them against a foreign enemy. That's how this works. People speaking even more plainly, the Belgian Prime Minister, Bart de Wever, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, saying this.
But now so many red lines are being crossed that you have the choice between your self-respect. Being a happy vassal is one thing, being a miserable slave is something else. If you back down now, you're going to lose your dignity. And that's probably the most precious thing you can have in a democracy. It's your dignity.
So, I mean, just outright admitting there from an international leader that we were a vassal. We were a vassal, but at least we got something out of it. At least we got some kind of stability out of it. At least we had some kind of level of fair play. There were reasonable trade agreements. We could predict what was going to happen. That was the whole point of this new world order that was established following the Second World War. Now that's been torn down. We don't want to be the unhappy slaves, so we're going to have to get back together and re-establish ourselves. Which, again, would be a good thing if only it weren't that the Eurocrats in charge don't actually care about European people and their well-being. Even America's diplomats, the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, went up and just outright said that the Trump administration and I are here to make a very clear point. Globalization has failed the West and the United States of America. It's a failed policy, and it's left America behind. America is done exporting jobs and offshoring its future. Will no longer give in to globalization. These are all very strong statements regarding how this globalist world order has completely failed. And I'm not a fan of the globalist world order either. It's just that this is interesting how this is all just being flat out said. Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada, came out and said American hegemony in particular helped provide public goods, open sea lanes, stable financial system, collective security, but this bargain no longer works. Let me be direct, we're in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as a weapon, tariffs as a leverage, and he goes on to talk about how the globalization and integration of these international economies has led to America being able to put the boot on their neck through use of tariffs, through use of economic leverage. So perhaps this will split things up. Perhaps, as you're suggesting, it will continue to push people into the arms of a China that may potentially be a future international threat, but at the moment is presenting itself as simply a benign trading partner.
Well, there's multiple things going on here. The first of which I think is actually a good thing, in that it's probably good for Europe to be more independent, and I very much welcome that. And even though it's not necessarily intentional by the Trump administration, the fact that it's giving Europe basically a kick up the backside to do this is great, and I think it's necessary for Europe to succeed, to be more self-sufficient. And at the minute, I think all China really needs to do is not rub anyone the wrong way and continue trading with them to capitalize on the US's losses here.
We have Trump now speaking on the World Economic Forum, who says that Europe should follow the US in putting a halt to mass migration and stop transferring its capabilities to the third world countries. And he says that many cities in the West are now unrecognizable and not in a good way. Yeah, but
This is all just playing to.
He did sabotage, perhaps unintentionally, but he did. The people in Europe who are talking about this precisely with his talk of invading Greenland. And also, I don't think that when he's talking about mass migration, I think there is more mass migration to the US than there is in Europe. And we do talk about Europe and about the problems with mass migration in Europe, but it's not that that the US doesn't face them and that it has stopped facing them now.
The demographics in America are much less stable than they are in Europe, and that's even with mass migration into Europe. Europe is still, most countries within Europe are still majority European countries. If you go to somewhere like California in America, you're basically in Mexico. That's just if you go to southern Texas, you're basically in Mexico. That's how these demographics changes work. If you look at American birth rates of the white versus non-white birth rates, some of those southern states and even some of the ones going a little bit far, north up the western seaboard, the white birth rates are terrible. They make up a vast, like a tiny minority of the overall births going on here. European birth rates aren't great either, but we are still in a better position to remain European than America is to remain a European descended nation. And what Trump is just appealing to there is rote populist talking points. Ultimately, he can say all of that, but his actions outside of that speak louder than his words. And what he is doing through all of this is further entrenching an elite class that don't agree with him on those points, that actually present a threat to Europe remaining European going forwards. And what I'm talking about here is like Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, going up and saying that, there's an age of populism and deep institutional mistrust. We've lost all of the trust in elites and we need to regain that trust. This is the opening. This is the opportunity for all of these traitorous elites to regain that trust by, again, facing out towards a new foreign enemy. On both sides, Russia to the east, America to the west. You have Finland's president saying that, again, and I think this is a good thing that people are talking like this, that Europe can unequivocally defend itself without the Americans. I think that's a
factually
good
correct statement as well, in that, they talk about the threat of Russia, but compared to the entirety of Europe, that's not equivalent, right? It is absurd to even suggest that. Even looking on just purely industrial capability and things like that, all of Europe plus their trading partners, it's not comparable.
Germany has been speaking about what a mistake it was to get rid of some of its nuclear plants.
Mm-hmm. And it certainly was.
And it absolutely was. In which case, how long would it take Germany to put that infrastructure back in place?
I think
quite a time, unfortunately.
I think the current Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, did say that he is planning on revisiting nuclear plants in Germany.
They should.
Most common sense thing. They should be.
It took him about 10 years to understand common sense.
Yeah. Deindustrialization and disarmament was a huge mistake, but it was all predicated, it was all done under this now old New World Order. And now we're moving into a completely different paradigm.
There's a trend at a sort of domestic level that I've noticed, that places that do particularly well, cities and towns that tend to have opportunities for all of the different strata of society and are economically prosperous for it, tend to have about 15 or so % of their economy be industry, which is very rare in the West these days, other than perhaps the United States, which has been better at preserving it. But in Europe in particular, because we've deindustrialized, we've lost this key part of our economy, which, for the working classes, believe it or not, they sort of need those jobs, because not only are they opportunities for people to, go beyond themselves, but also they're very valuable to have in your country for defence.
Certainly, absolutely. And but here's where it comes to reminding everybody that the people who are all saying this aren't our friends in Europe. They're not friends of the European people or European values or demographics or preserving any of those things. Because one of the announcements that was made by Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the EU, was that the EU is on the cusp of making the mother of all deals with India. And again, this is one of those things, well, we might not be able to trade quite as securely with America as we could. India is a huge market, an enormous market. So let's go over to them. But the thing is, with deals with India come little strings attached that Modi likes to put in there, which is, well, India has a huge, huge excess population. So we would like it if we could have some kind of exchange of labour as well. So with trades with India comes also massive influx of Indian immigration.
It's one of their main exports, to be honest.
Yes.
Is Indian people themselves.
So if we're further entrenching this, that's not great for anybody. That's not great for any of us. And again, this is what we covered a little bit in your segment as well, but I just want to remind everybody that this kind of belligerent rhetoric was one of the main movers of the Liberals getting re-elected, despite the fact that the Conservatives in Canada, who would have been better allies to Trump as a northern neighbour, that's what led to them losing. And there's testimonies in this article from people who were saying that, you know, I was a lifelong Conservative voter in Canada, but America saying that they were going to annex us, positioning ourselves as an enemy of Canada, and themselves as an enemy of Canada, and Polivier positioning himself as a friend of MAGA, therefore also enemy of Canada, meant that I voted Liberal for the very first time in my life.
Yeah,
there's like half a dozen,
and all of this was just to own the libs on Twitter.
Yeah, it says Polivier's campaign, during which he focused on small government and libertarian issues, combined with dissatisfaction at the scandal, hit Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's handling of the economy to see the Conservatives move 24 points ahead of the Liberals in January, according to a poll tracker. But within a matter of weeks, everything changed. Trudeau announced his resignation, while Trump swept back to power in the US, threatening to use economic pressure to annex Canada as a 51st state before imposing sweeping 25% tariffs on goods from America's northern neighbour, sparking outrage across the country, pushing them all into the arms of the Liberals. And this is one of the threats of European right-wing populist parties as well, like the AFD. There are a number of articles all talking about how the AFD for a while now has had major support from MAGA. J.D. Vance went and spoke about how great the AFD was and all of the threats that Germany faces from mass migration. There is a definite connection that the two parties have, and this one's going back a few months. You've got multiple articles. German far-right courts Donald Trump and MAGA in hunt for powerful friends. The MAGA war on European democracy, and then you start to see the shift. The global populist right has a MAGA problem. Until you get to this recent article, and you quoted the one from what's-her-face, from the Unheard article in the last segment. Here's another one by Maurice Frank. The AFD is losing patience with MAGA. They're having to suddenly heel turn, to switch around, to flip their rhetoric, because the comments about Greenland in recent days suggest the duo have been following the latest polls. 72% of Germans consider the US attack on Venezuela and Maduro's arrest unjustified. Only 12% feel Trump is doing a good job as president, and an all-time low of 15% consider the US to be a trustworthy partner. The AFD enjoys the support of a rough quarter of voters, and now it doesn't want to alienate the German mainstream by getting too close to a deeply unpopular president. So this puts everybody in a massive bind. The AFD doesn't want to alienate their voters, but also they do have strong ties to MAGA, and presumably also wouldn't want to alienate those ties to MAGA at the same time if they're still going to be the government for the next 3 years. In America. So this is just putting everybody in a difficult position, and this is reforging the world order as it has existed for years at this point, and it is very interesting to see where this all may fall as the year progresses, particularly when we get to the midterms and see how that affects MAGA as well.